right, so good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming to today's event. We'll have a plenary speaker in a short while. And I would like to lead off with some maybe accolades of Purdue and what we're doing and show you some of the impact we're having. So it's an event on semiconductors, and you can't do that without showing Moore's Law. And Moore's Law has been predicted dead many, many times. And basically what's charted here is the number of transistors per square millimeter. And as you can see, it goes up exponentially still. This is up, I pulled this off today till 2020. Now, how did we get here? And for that, it's actually useful to look into a historical chart where this is taken from Intel in 2009. In 2009, they had 32 nanometer in production. They knew that in 2011, they wanted to have a 22 nanometer node, and then they go down. This is the nomenclature of the industry. They go node by node, and it's 18 months or 2 years, roughly. So they didn't want to reveal what they would have in the box in 2013, they're 40 now. They just didn't want to show it. And then they openly said, we really don't know what's happening at a 10 nanometer node. That's all research, we're not sure. Now, if you translate these nodes are typically the gate length. If you translate that gate length into atoms, silicon atoms in a chain, you're going down from 126 atoms down to 40. That is very countable. This is not Avogadro number of atoms anymore. And if you count the number of electrons active under a gate, you go down to the tens. It's not a gazillion plus one electrons. It's not a continuum fluid anymore. So the interesting thing is in 2009, you couldn't, for any money in the world, buy a tool that would simulate such a device and new atoms existed. Anything was continuum. There was no atomistic representation of the device. Now, why is that interesting? Because number one, you can look back in history, so that it took them a couple more years to actually come out with these nodes. And in 2015, they started to use a piece of software that came out of my research lab to design what is in the future. And this tool set is rather generic. It can basically connect atoms and make any device you want. And it took 30 years to develop such a thing, because it's actually radically different from any simulation engine that's out there. And now you can buy it or get a license to it with Silvaco. They actually changed their motto from devices to systems. Now they call it from atoms to systems. Now, that's all cool. But I would say Moore's Law in its old form is going to be very dead. There's not much you can really do by making these channels any much smaller. So that will continue, but at a slower pace. And it's really going to be in circuit design, on making, the Legos are no longer getting faster and smaller, but now you have to build better houses with your Legos that are more interesting. And so there was just a news announcement that faculty at Purdue just won another grant here in this Emmy Commons project, and indeed, it's all about novel architectures, doing things differently than they have been done before. But that means also we need a lot of engineers that do all of this. Now, Purdue has a beautiful program where we're teaching students in STEM, so chips are not just design, I have to say, even when we're talking to designers, there's actually still devices and packaging and all that stuff. And that's important. But we also have a way to actually reach the world. And that's where I want to spend 2 minutes showing you what we can do on NanoHub, which is a platform for modeling, simulation, and lectures. So to give you an idea of what the reach is, I want to show you a map of 2,086 technical universities in the US. You can go in the Carnegie list of universities. They have a rankings of R1, meaning high research, then R2, not so high, R3, a little bit of research. And then you'll see gray dots, 1,600 universities that are either four-year colleges or two-year colleges that don't have research. Now, if you look at what the industry does right now, I actually have data from EDA vendors, 2 out of this list where we're partnering with. They serve roughly 239 universities. Most of these dots are red, meaning they're at elite research universities. If you look at people that actually tape out, that actually take their design, it's even fewer universities. but in total it's 239 universities that have experience in taping out and in designing. Now there's a question, is that actually enough universities to generate enough students that can actually fill the pipeline of what's needed in semiconductors? So the EDA industry serves 11% of these universities, but really they're tapped out at 81% of all R1s have it already. There's little growth to be had at R1 research universities, and they only serve 5% of the rest of the university. That market penetration is tiny. So the question is, why is that? You have to have a lot of infrastructure to do that. You have to be a rich university. Installation, legal, hardware, maintenance of all these things is very hard to do for most universities. So the idea is, can you deliver that over the cloud? And we have some experience in the cloud. This is the number of users we're serving annually in NanoHub in terms of modeling and simulation and lectures and tutorials. And this is the number of universities we serve. We're close to 900 universities that changed curriculum. These tools you can't get anywhere else, meaning it's new curriculum, it's changed curriculum. So we have penetration there. And in fact, we lowered the barriers, and we serve 43% of all technical universities in the United States with modeling and simulation in typically semiconductor devices materials. So we're the bottom feeders, so to speak. But now we want to get into chip design. And one more highlight I want to say, we serve 210 minority-serving institutions, which is a big deal because these universities mostly have American students. And if I look at our grad class, I'm a foreigner too, right? But it's 85% of graduate students in electrical engineering are foreigners, which doesn't speak very highly of our US system of education, but also it means we're not really serving Americans very well. And I think that's not right. So if you just look at industry guidance of who they know in terms of universities, it's very limited, but the real guidance you can get from NanoHub data on how to reach people, how to reach universities. So what we're doing right now is we're building Chips Hub inside NanoHub to do chip design and try to reach these universities. So that's really a fast highlight of some of the efforts at Purdue. So let me introduce Eileen Terry. So she's a people leader and a technologist. She focused on bringing visions to life through innovative silicon design. She leads design and execution of silicon from algorithms to delivery in Meta's design center in Silicon Valley. So it's really about incorporating new circuits that do things better than if you did it in software. She's a technical expert with 20 years of experience in the field of semiconductors. Her leadership passion is facilitating the collaboration of a large set of engineers, each with different areas of expertise to support common goals and vision. Her technical passion is working in innovative silicon that are used in novel devices and products. And when she talks about devices, it's the real thing. I'm talking devices, you can't even see it. So prior to joining Meta in 2021, Eileen was at Microsoft for 9 years. There she served as partner silicon and systems architecture. In this role, she was responsible for leading a highly talented group of silicon architects with expertise in performance modeling, power modeling, and networking, and SoC architectures. Her charter was to drive innovation to reality with silicon tape-outs targeting HoloLens, Xbox, and also data center applications. Before Microsoft, Eileen was at AMD in design engineering, where she focused on graphics memory controllers and virtual memory. She holds 7 patents in silicon design and has spoken at events like Hot Chips. She's focused on mentoring senior and emerging female leaders and is honored to participate as a mentor in the GSA WHM initiative. Eileen received her BS from Yale in computer science and electrical engineering, graduating magna cum laude. In her spare time, she serves on the board of several nonprofits, including Elevant Tutoring. So with that, Eileen, come on up.
I think I'm going to use this one.
Oh, it's on you.
I love it, yes. So it's really quite an honor to be here today talking to you. I had the fortune of taking a tour at Burke, and I've gotten to talk to Sophie and Matthew and even Christina about some of the things that you're learning. And frankly, I'm kind of jealous. When I went to school, I went to Yale in the 90s, and there were no classes on VLSI design. There were no classes on ASIC design. I don't even remember there being an FPGA. But when I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to do something with computers. I've been programming them since I was just a little kid, but I didn't want to be a software engineer. I wanted to do something a little more tangible. I wanted to do something that had impact, that had a little bit more permanence. And like Gerhard said, I wanted to work on something, devices, things I could actually hold in my hand. So not the little devices, but the devices that you can really hold in your hand. So without knowing much about anything, I decided to become a hardware engineer. And I actually had no idea what that meant. I'm really glad I did. So today I run a 200-person engineering organization at Meta, and my team, the Silicon Accelerators. What we're responsible for is taking the algorithms and figuring out how to make them low enough power on the silicon that goes into devices like this. This is Orion. Orion was announced at MetaConnect just a few weeks ago. And it's something right out of science fiction. But it's here today. It's something you can hold in your hand, a device that you can hold in your hand, in large part due to advances in semiconductor technologies. I'm really lucky, I think, as Gerhard mentioned, I've gotten to work on some really innovative devices in semiconductors. I've gotten to work on some gaming devices. I've gotten to work on augmented reality glasses. I've even gotten to work on an AI superchip. And what those experiences have taught me is that everything is a skill. Yes, it takes technical skills to put together devices like this, but it also takes a multitude of soft skills and even some life skills. I think about it a little bit like a role-playing game. So as you start, you play the game, you earn a skill point. And then you take that skill point, and you go and play the game some more, and you earn some more skill points. You get better and better at the game. But when you're building devices like this, there are lots and lots of different skills we have to learn. So I'm going to take you through 3 experiences in my life. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I acquired those skills, but I'm also going to weave in some of the engineering topics. And I really want you to take away, I want you to see yourself in these roles. And so I know I'm doing a little short Q&A afterward, and then we'll have a networking event. I really encourage you to really come and ask me any questions on these topics. So let me talk a little bit about when I graduated from college. This is R600 Pele, and I'll talk about it in just a moment. But when I graduated from college, I knew nothing, right? I had no skills, and I jumped right into the deep end with physical design at Intel. So physical design, I think we'll hear a little bit more. Deb is an amazing physical designer as well. But physical design is a role where we are responsible for taking the gate, or the RTL, which is register transfer language, which describes the high-level constructs on the chip, and then turning it into something physically realizable, something that we can tape out. It has a lot of different skills inside of it. So for instance, we do synthesis. We take RTL, turn it into gates. We do floor planning and place and route. And what that means, maybe a little bit like floor planning your dorm room, except you have millions and millions of gates and memories and cells that you have to figure out how to put into a bounding box. And we do lots of automated checks, physical verification checks, and we do timing to make sure that the whole thing meets the timing requirements of the chip. But since I didn't know what any of this meant when I graduated from college, it meant I had to learn how to build those technical skills. And I did a lot of the same things you're doing, right? I took classes. I took a class at Stanford. But I also asked a lot of questions. And asking questions, asking good questions, is actually a skill in and of itself. So for instance, I asked, how do I do it? Why do we do it this way? What are other ways to do it? How do I know I've done it correctly? I asked a lot of questions. And I really led with my curiosity. As I became more and more and more curious, I started writing RTL. So at the time, I wrote in a language called Verilog. Verilog is syntactically similar to C. However, instead of executing one after another, it executes all at once. And for me, I found that extremely mind-boggling. But I practiced, and I practiced, and I practiced, and I practiced, and I started getting the hang of it. And I started developing an expertise, because at this time, similar to what's happening right now with the transition from automated tools to AI-generated tools, at the time we were seeing a real big transition from manual tools to automated tools. And so this ability to take RTL, to write RTL, that could get through all the physical design tools and express really complex physical structures on the device was actually a niche skill set that not a lot of people had. And so I was starting to become an expert in my field. But unfortunately, as happens in the field, my project was canceled. And so I had to go find another job. I was really lucky. My friend Andrew, he put my resume on the desk of a hiring manager at ATI. And just like that, I was off to the races again. I had to learn yet another role that I knew nothing about. So this time, the role was called integration. And integrators are responsible for taking RTL from all over the place, from outside the company, from inside the company, and packaging it up so that it can be presented to a downstream team. In my case, it was a physical design team. I had to learn everything again on the job. So I used some of the same type of skill acquisition. Unfortunately, there were no classes, so I had to learn everything. At that time, everything was on manuals and books. I asked a lot of questions, and I really led with my curiosity. And that curiosity really helped me, right? I got the opportunity to work on a lot of different roles. That time I was ATI. ATI was later acquired by AMD. But I got to work on a lot of different roles. And I thought, I'm really having the impact I wanted to have. So raise your hand if you've played Xbox, played on PlayStation, or maybe have played with like a discrete Radeon graphics card. Yeah, my code is in all of them. And it's really kind of wild to me that I went from knowing absolutely nothing to having code in devices that almost everyone I know uses. So I'm thinking, wow, I'm starting to become an expert in my field. I'm having impact. But I was actually failing. And the reason is because to make a chip as complex as this is Xbox One, requires hundreds and thousands of different people with different skills working together, rowing in the same direction with the same goals, objectives, schedules, motivations, you name it, everyone has to be aligned on the same goal. But I want to kind of paint a picture of myself at the time. So I'm a very big introvert. My sister, she used to call me a turtle because I would sit in my room. I was always in my room, and I'd only stick out my head occasionally. I can only think The only times I'm aware I've ever been in a state of flow is when I've been behind a computer. I dream and code. And I'm also a little abrasive, or I was a little abrasive. At the time, people commented that I was not good at working with other people. In fact, my first performance review out of college, it said something like, Eileen is learning all of the technical skills required of the role, but she should avoid working with other people. Ouch. So my epiphany came in 2009. I got sent to go to China to help bring up a team in Shanghai. And I think I got selected because of my big, bold, American, direct, maybe a little abrasive style. We wanted to help make the team in Shanghai more comfortable with people of my style. But instead, it was me that came back changed. I was so inspired by the impact that this team was having, despite cultural boundaries, language boundaries, communication skills they were still learning, that I came back really inspired to try to learn a new type of skills. So in this time, I was thinking about more soft skills. So I talked about some of the techniques I learned for learning technical skills, but they really weren't working for me anymore. So I had to develop some new techniques. So my favorite technique from this period is something I call mentoring from afar. It works like this. You find someone that you think is good at the skill you're trying to learn, and you copy them. So my mentor from afar, the one I learned how to communicate with people of different skills, his name was Scott. His name is Scott. So I would watch Scott. He would get us in the same room, talk, maybe it was a hardware engineer and a software engineer. We were disagreeing on how to program virtual memory subsystem. But he would get us in a room, he would get us at the whiteboard, and he would get us drawing together, engaging. But he did more than that. He asked what I thought were very, very basic questions. He wrote a ton of documentation, and he took feedback with curiosity. To this day, I'm not sure if Scott knows how much of an impact he's had on my career. He was just a fabulous mentor from afar and helped really influence me in how I learn new soft skills. Another technique I've used is hiring coaches. It's a little bit like hiring a tutor, right? I get one-on-one catered help in order to really learn the skill that I'm trying to learn. As I was preparing my notes today, one of my coworkers says to me, Eileen, but you're so good at communicating with people. I kind of looked around and thought, maybe she's talking about someone else. But at work, what she's observing is that to do my job, so my team consists of algorithm designers, architects, logic designers, design verification engineers, physical designers, firmware engineers. I have to communicate, I have to connect with all of these people of very, very different skill sets, and I have to get them aligned and communicating on the same wavelength. Everything is a skill. If you can name it, if you can value it, you can learn it. So now I'm going to introduce you to Luca. Luca is a character from the video game Chrono Trigger. So Chrono Trigger is a classic video game from the 90s. I know I am dating myself. And Chrono Trigger was known for a really innovative gameplay. At the time, you got to, the endings changed based on what skills and what choices you made for the characters. So when it came to choosing my avatar, my partner chose Luca. And he chose Luca because she's known for her loyalty and empathy, but she's also known for being a brilliant inventor. Whenever there was a problem that she needed to solve, she wasn't afraid to just make something up, to invent the future, no matter how crazy it seemed. She was not afraid to learn new skills. But actually, I like Luca as my avatar because it looks to me like she's wearing the world's first augmented reality glasses. Of course, this is me wearing the world's most advanced augmented reality glasses. So creating a device like this has a lot of ambiguity. And how I got my role at Meta is because I was able to seize the opportunities that came with that ambiguity. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got to Meta. So I went from ATI, I went to Microsoft. And at the time, Microsoft was investing in a new Generation 1 device. And what I mean by that, it was being invented from the ground up. So I went to work on HoloLens. I had been working at AMD, so ATI had been acquired by AMD. And like many traditional semiconductor companies, AMD's focus was on silicon execution. We taped out 3, 4, 5, maybe more times a year. And many of the people I was working on were all targeted at the same thing. Our work was very derivative. My role was very clear. But when I went to Microsoft, we were inventing this product from the ground up. So everything was unclear. I was working, it was a software company, it is a software company. And so people communicated with different styles. We didn't know what was going to happen next. The path was unclear. My role was unclear. I found this transition extremely hard. I almost quit in the first year. I started interviewing, and I remember vividly sitting on the floor of my apartment, just huddled up thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay the path? Or am I going to go back to something I feel more familiar with? I really wish I had had these words from Steve Jobs. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. I really couldn't have said it better. For me, it means trust your instincts, embrace the ambiguity. I'm really, really glad I was able to do that. I did stay the path, and I stayed at Microsoft. At Microsoft, I became the SoC architect. What an SoC architect does is they take IP architectures and they make sure that they all can connect to each other through interconnects on the die. And they're responsible for making sure that the die also connects to the outside world. And then I became the system architect for HoloLens. And what that role means is that the system architecture team is responsible for making sure that the different hardware systems on the device are able to talk to each other and helps make trade-offs between things like firmware, software, chips, the display, et cetera. I even had to pivot my entire team from working on augmented reality glasses to working on AI superchips. There was a lot of change, but it was totally worth it. So this is HPU 2.0. I presented this at Hot Chips, and it was invented from scratch to take something that looks like this. This is my friend Nagina, and she's wearing a prototype device. And you can see the FPGAs and the devices all sticking out of her head. But what you can't see is that there's a big bundle of wires that's coming down the back of her head to a big workstation sitting on the floor. And so we invented this HPU from scratch to take something that looked like this and make it look like this. When I told my sister that I was talking about ambiguity in a lecture around semiconductors, she encouraged me to use any other word. She told me chaos, mystery, constant change. For her, all of these have more positive connotations than ambiguity. But I chose to keep the word ambiguity because for me, it is a hard skill to learn, but it is a skill. It requires you to really zoom out. You can't make goals for this day or for tomorrow or for next week, but you have to really zoom out and make goals on a longer time frame. It also requires you to really trust your instincts, to do what Steve Jobs says, and trust that the dots will connect. So let's circle back. Here I am at Meta. And at Meta, my job is to do like Luca. I have to invent the future. I have to invent things. I have to embrace the ambiguity. Everything is a skill. If you can learn it, if you can name it, you can learn it. So I've talked about a bunch of different types of roles today. I've talked about physical design, integration, SoC architecture, design, algorithmic engineering, and these are all roles that we hire for at Meta. And there are, I think, a bunch more. I actually took this out of our job site and made a word cloud out of it. So there's a bunch of other analog, FPGA, machine learning. And I put this slide up here because I really want you to see yourself as having the ability to learn the skills required for any one of these roles. So I have a little confession to make. My code is in pretty much every gaming engine. I've made a bunch of references to video games, but I myself am not a video gamer. However, I have watched hundreds and thousands of hours of video games. My partner loves to play, and I actually really enjoy watching him play. For me, it's like watching a movie where the characters are becoming bigger and better, sometimes better, more abled beings. I also like that as you play the game, you get more skill points, and part of the fun is choosing which skill are you going to choose next. You cannot learn them all at once. Maybe you're playing Alloy in Horizon Zero Dawn, and you're learning to slow down time so you can focus better to shoot your arrow. I think the skill is called concentration. Or maybe you're a guardian in Destiny, and you're learning the ability to help heal your fire team. I think the skill is called, or the ability is called Healing Rift. There are an infinitude of skills that you can learn. Even things that you might not think are skills that are learnable. Empathy, warmth, charisma, and I've heard even happiness is a skill that you can learn. If you can name it, if you can value it, you can learn it. So I'm going to close out with one last life skill. I graduated from college in 2001. I joined the job market, and this was in the middle of the dot-com bust. Many of my friends lost their jobs before they even started. Their jobs were rescinded. I was actually quite lucky. I got to start my job, but just 90 days later, my entire team was transferred to Intel. I started 2 weeks before September 11th, 2001. And my brother, he died of cancer just a few months later. As you know, I also had to learn everything on the job. I had to learn every technical skill I had. It was a lot of change for me. It was really scary. I had no idea how I was going to get through it. My mom gave me this little piece of paper, and I'm sharing it here today with you because it has meant so much to me. I taped this little piece of paper on every cubicle wall, every open space desk, every office wall I've ever worked in. It says, change of any sort requires courage. Change of any sort requires courage. And it reminds me that I have the courage, the skill, to be able to deal with anything that comes next. Because life is uncertain. Embrace the ambiguity. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Invest in yourself. Everything is a skill that you can learn. Thank you.
Eileen has a few minutes to answer questions if anyone has questions. You guys can come on up. I think it might be a little bit quicker than us walking, unless you can yell loud enough.
Yeah, I have a question. How have you the overlap between the algorithms for like computer science versus the algorithms for like hardware design, like floor planning, like you talked about? Have you overlap or not really?
Yeah, so on my team, one of the things we do is we take algorithms, let's say something like rendering, computer vision algorithms. I'm presuming, well, I don't know. So a computer vision algorithm is something like hand tracking, eye tracking, depth. So these are all types of algorithms that in order to, I think Professor Gerhard was alluding to it, is that in order to make them low enough power so that they can run on the device, we actually use a whole host of different techniques. So one of them is hardware acceleration, meaning we take those algorithms and we figure out how to harden them, how to make them run directly in the silicon itself. So not through a CPU, not through a GPU, but directly. And then we use a whole host of other types of techniques. And so for those types of roles, actually being really well versed in algorithmic design, and also having some fundamentals about hardware design, like what a physical construct means, meaning do you know what a cycle is? Do you know how to keep data from moving from one place to another? Some of those kinds of techniques really overlap in this space. Some non-intersecting techniques, for instance, some of the low power design techniques we use, power gating, clock gating, adaptive voltage scaling, transitioning using low VT cells. These are all kind of techniques that don't really intersect as much with the algorithmic design, but they're both really, really important in order to be able to make a device like this.
Hi, thank you, Eileen. That was a really beautiful presentation. And I just wanted to ask about, how you do it all. I do a lot of work sometimes, but I've never really been able to get into a flow state like you describe it. What are some of the ways that you've been able to latch on to that feeling and really, shatter your expectations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't talk about it too much, but when I think about innate, I think some skills are innate and some require a lot more learning. And so I'm very fortunate that I found some of the innate skills, meaning I had a computer when I was a kid, and so I started programming and experimenting with it. And so it was just easy for me. So I think for a lot of people, you have to find the thing that is maybe innate for you, that you really latch on, that makes sense to you. And then once you're in it, it's kind of you forget to eat, you forget to sleep, and it's kind of an amazing experience.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you for the motivating talk. I really like the message that we can gain any skill if we have the courage and curiosity to do the. My question might be a bit silly, but you talked about different kinds of roles from RTL designer to architect, system designer, or at algorithm level. With the improvements in LLMs in terms of reasoning and other capabilities, which skill or which role do you think should students focus on? Someone who is just going to enter the industry as a hardware engineer.
Yeah, I love it. It's a really good question, actually, because I talked about this transition from manual to automated, and I think the same thing is happening now, where you're seeing more and more of these roles are being augmented with AI. I know we were joking at dinner last night, is I call AI or ML machine regurgitation, because I think it is really good for the things that happen over and over and over again. But when you're working on inventing, those aren't things that an LLM can do, right? Because they're trained on things that already exist. So I think that AI is going to really profoundly impact things like RTL design, but we'll still need RTL designers. But in that same way I talked about being able to marry the skill of RTL design with physical design to be able to get through those tools, I think similar things are going to happen, is where you have some knowledge, let's say, and being able to understand how to get the LLM or to get the trained model to produce the type of code you want, that's going to become more and more of a skill. So maybe an RTL designer is no longer going to write Verilog or system Verilog, but maybe something that allows the AI to more accurately represent the physical construct you want. In physical design, I know I'll let Deb answer this question. I think that's one of the spaces. We saw some of this first research happen in AI, and I know it's really, really changing kind of the way we think about doing physical design as well. Yeah, it's a really good question, right? This industry is changing just constantly. And so, you saw that picture, it was kind of in the corner here, where Gerhard had a CPU, GPU, and he had I don't know, it was a jumble of gates. We call it heterogeneous design. And so I think being able to understand, how we get lower and lower power with embedded systems is something that we'll be doing more and more of. I've done a lot of consumer devices, things that you can hold in your hand. But even in the data center, and I know we have a panelist talking about the data center, being able to do low power design is also incredibly important so that we can really control costs.
My question is, you mentioned you were an introvert and your first performance review is not to work with other people, and then you slowly transition to becoming a leader for 200 plus people in Meta. So I'm just curious, how's this transition from being an introvert who currently work with people to a people leader?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still an introvert. I know some of the people know this. I've had to learn how to manage it. I actually had a friend who taught me that I need to spend time every day by myself, like a full day with other people means that I won't be able to be myself. So a lot of this is, a little bit of it is fake it till you make it, right? Have the impact that you want to have. But a lot of it is also really being able to manage oneself and being able to manage kind of the expectations of oneself. But I really actually do think of everything as a skill. So I mentioned some of those soft skills, warmth, empathy. Those are all skills that I've had to learn, right? And I do it by watching other people, by watching people that have those types of skills, and I try to emulate. Uh-oh, I'm getting a hard one now.
So I would agree that you can put your mind to anything and learn it almost. But there's one innate skill that is, I think, hard to teach. And I'm asking a personal question. I have 2 kids. One has grit, the other doesn't. And if you don't have grit, it's hard to learn anything. Or it's a closed mindset versus open mindset. So what's your advice for my kids?
One of the techniques I really like to use as a leader is something called flip the question. And what that means is, that is a really great question. What do you think? And I'll say this because one of the things you learn is that I really don't have a lot of answers, and really often the people asking me the questions actually have a lot more answers than I do. So you're living life experience, and so my guess is that you've started to learn things that are working and things that are not. So I'm going to flip the question. How do you teach grit?
I really think it's a mindset. If somebody has in their mind they can do anything, they just have to crank at it, versus a person that has a certain expectation of themselves. And if they don't meet that expectation, they stop.
Yeah.
And it's hard to lift that person up on maybe small steps and build their confidence. I think that's the only answer I have.
Yeah.
But it's just, I mean, it's innate, right? We have
Certain things are easier, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm just gonna add one thing. So you heard me say, if you can name it, if you can value it, you can learn it. And for me, that's part of that middle part, is really being able to value it, is what helps me learn new skills. And it'll help you learn new skills, is that middle part about really understanding the value and the impact. That's where I think those new skill acquisition comes from.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you so much for this talk, and I think a lot of what you talked about really resonated with kind of how I feel right now and what I want to do in the future. And I just wanted to ask about passion, and whether sometimes you feel like you kind of lose your passion, and if you haven't ever lost your passion, how do you kind of keep that up? And if you have lost your passion, how do you kind of build that up and kind of find your love again for what you want to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really great question. I mean, this is, I think, another life skill, and things aren't linear, right? And you're gonna experience ebbs and flows in your career. We were talking about earlier today about liking our manager, I know people are gonna talk about finding teams where you fit. And I think part of having passion is being able to find places that you feel like you fit in, and that you like the team and the work that you're doing. So it's very personal, and it's very much a life skill. I hope you're passionate about becoming a designer, though, about going into making computer chips, because there are really some very cool things that we're working on. Really gonna change the future, I think. If you think about, I'm gonna pick it out of my pocket, this device. This didn't exist when I graduated from college. You know, if we think about Orion, oh, I keep this off. Oh, this is just not something that could have existed. And so I think we're really lucky to be able to dream about a future that looks a little different than what we have today.
I just wanted to briefly share who our organization is that put this event together. So my name is Lara Ryach, and I'm the University Program Manager for the Global Semiconductor Alliance's Women's Leadership Initiative. Our organization, GSA, is a leading industry organization where we provide a neutral platform for collaboration. It enables all of our global executives to innovate with peers and partners and customers to accelerate industry growth. Our members, our companies, represent roughly 77% of the global semiconductor industry globally. Our Women's Leadership Initiative addresses critical workforce needs within the semiconductor industry. We focus on increasing the representation of underrepresented individuals in leadership roles and encouraging more STEM-focused candidates to enter the field. And through our university programs, we're hoping to foster strong connections between industry professionals. Sorry, I just lost my place. And educational institutions, and hoping to help bridge the workforce gap in this vital industry. So we're going to go ahead and move into our moderated panel discussion. And then afterward, as I mentioned, we'll have a networking session and refreshments following. I am pleased to introduce our panel moderator, Deb Dyson. Deb is a lifelong New Englander. She's got over 25 years in the semiconductor industry with IBM, Cavium, and Marvell Technologies, and she specializes in SoC design, timing, closure. Deb leads a physical design team at Marvell, focusing on ARM-based processors for AI networks and data centers. She's passionate about mentoring and supporting women in engineering. She holds a BSEE from the University of Vermont, an MSEE from Cornell, and a certificate in diversity and inclusion from Tufts. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Deb. Deb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lara. I appreciate that introduction. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to come here today representing Marvell to share some of the experiences that myself and this wonderful panel have in the careers that we've developed over the last number of years. So I'm going to start off and have the panelists give a little bit of an introduction to themselves. And I'm going to start off with Amrita Sinha, who's visiting us today from Microsoft.
Thank you, Deb. So hi, everybody. My name is Amrita Sinha. I'm from Microsoft, and I run the planning, cloud capacity planning for all of Microsoft Azure, all resources that we offer, compute, storage, GPUs. Essentially, the job is to make sure cloud is truly unlimited. Anybody who wants to run cloud, the capacity is there, and while doing so, I have to make sure it's profitable for the company. So optimal capacity planning is what I do, is what my organization does. Prior to Microsoft, I was at Google doing a very similar role. Before that, I was in semiconductor industry. And then before that in consumer, Apple, Cisco, HP. So I've been in the Bay Area for quite some time and got an opportunity to work with some of the best tech companies out there. Very proud to and happy to be here.
Great. Thank you. Our next panelist is Fauna Adams, and she's here representing ARM.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really delighted to be here. So I'm with ARM. I've been with them for close to 8 years. However, prior to that, I've been in the industry working for more than 20 odd years. ARM is my introduction to semiconductors. I've had experience in the delivery as a delivery expert across finance, e-commerce, and I had the ARM's journey to the cloud. So all of I lead that program, and my role there is to ensure that we are able to utilize the cloud and all that is out there to ensure that we can build great products.
Great, excellent. And our third panelist is Pooja Salavadia, and she is here today representing Micron.
Thanks, Deb. And so I've been at Micron for almost 20 years. And I started as a fab engineer right after undergrad and got to wear the bunny suit and all that fun stuff. But along my 20 years, I'm on probably my 14th or 15th job at Micron. I've done fab engineering, worked on DRAM and NAND products, process integration, then worked with our suppliers, moved to a customer quality role, R&D operations, new product enablement, and then recently I joined our finance team, and my team is responsible for kind of strategic corporate development projects. So as you all can see, I've taken the scenic route on my professional journey, and I'm excited to share my experiences with you today.
Great. So I have a number of questions that I'm going to be presenting to our panelists, and we'll hear a little bit about their experiences, and they'll give their inputs and advice to everybody here. After about 45 minutes, we will open it up to the audience for any questions you may have. So start thinking about what you might want to learn from our great panelists here. So I'm going to start with our first question, and this is actually a question I'm going to ask all of our panelists. What initially drew you to the semiconductor industry, and what has motivated you to stay and grow in it? Amrita, do you want to start?
Sure. So my experience, as I said, is planning. I've been doing planning for 20 plus years, starting from consumer to cloud, now Google, Microsoft. And amongst all the companies, like if it was in consumer, Apple or Cisco or HP, or even these cloud companies, they all had a common connection of silicon. They all had that common tech, and it was a central function or a central or integral part of the profitability portion of the business. Even here at Microsoft, the work I'm doing in cloud capacity, Microsoft is a software company. We like to think we are a software company, but in reality, we are actually a hardware company. I mean, Elaine just spoke. She was all in the hardware side, in the devices side of Microsoft. Some of the things that she was showing is actually what our team does. So we have a team in Microsoft which is called Azure Hardware System Infrastructure Group, 8,000 people, and we design chips. We design chips which works with my colleague ARM's IP that we get from CPUs and GPUs. So the point I'm trying to make over here is that irrespective of the company that you choose to be, in any tech company, there is going to be an association of silicon. There is going to be an association of semiconductor aspect to it. What you learn at school from a tech standpoint of view is going to be very transferable in whatever company you choose. Your professional growth will be dependent on not just technical skills, the other skills as well, the soft skills that Elaine was talking about. A lot of it is based on circumstances, people around you, luck factor, everything is there. But the tech skills that you learn at school will be pretty much transferable across any technical company. So don't just focus on known semiconductor companies like Intel or AMD or NVIDIA. Every tech company will have an opportunity for you, and that's how you will pave your career going forward. I mean, that's my experience. So, yeah. Do you want to add on?
Yeah. So I was approached by someone within my network. As I mentioned earlier, ARM is my introduction into the semiconductor industry. And my mindset is always, why not, right? So I embraced the challenge. I took it on as an opportunity, and I just went headlong into it. My curiosity factor also played an important role in me agreeing to take on this particular role. And then as I got into it, I realized, the benefits, the value of what I was doing in there, that I was part of, and such emerging technology, the future. And it got me at that point in time, and it still has me. And no two days are the same for me. Every day is so different in how I support and then I enable all the fantastic work that happens across the board, working with multidisciplinary teams. So I love what I do at ARM, and I think it's one of the best decisions I made in my life.
Excellent. Pooja?
So when I was a student, like you guys, and my college, Georgia Tech, had a small fab, and We visited the Berk Nanotechnology Center earlier today, so it wasn't quite that cool and advanced when I was going to college, but it was still fun. So I got to make a 2-inch wafer, and that just whole process of using the tools and kind of seeing that process happen had me hooked. And I was an international student, and I see many of you here. Earlier we heard a stat that 85% students in our engineering programs are international. And so one of the requirements that I was looking for in a company, I wanted to work with somebody who would sponsor me to work in US. And lucky for me, Micron was sponsoring students at the time. And so I ended up at Micron, and I think I got very lucky in the first job I got at Micron, which was in the fab, but I was responsible for inline defect analysis. And like Fauna said, every day was a new day. I didn't know what problems I was going to investigate and chase, and it helped me learn about the entire fabrication process from start to end. And it was super exciting because I was learning something new every single day. And then since then, I mentioned earlier, I've had a lot of different roles at Micron. So I like to say one company, but many careers, which is unusual, as you heard, right? A lot of my colleagues have worked at many different places. And why have I stayed at Micron this whole time, or most of the whole time, is because I got to try so many different roles. And you can kind of build on what you already know and learn something new and keep growing. And the company's given me that opportunity, so I'm still here and learning something new every day.
Great. It sounds like we've all had our different paths that brought us into semiconductors, and I think we all enjoy what we do. All right, so the next question I have is for Amrita. What is the impact that you're having on the industry, and describe how you're changing the industry?
Impact on the industry, that's a big term. So, as I said, I have worked at multiple companies, and I'll tell you a story. When I was at Apple long back, it was 2007-8 timeframe. iPhone had just launched. It was the Apple time. The company to work at, Steve Jobs was literally God. And you all might not know, there used to be a Mac versus PC joke. Has anybody seen that, Mac versus PC joke? No? Man, I'm really, somebody has seen it. There's this cool Mac guy with a cool t-shirt and, with all the coolness, and here you have this PC guy buttoned up in shirt, very old and boring. So we used to make fun of Microsoft like anything back then. Then when I was at Google, the joke at Google used to be that, what's the #1 search word in Bing? Do you know what Bing is? Okay, thank God. So the #1 search word in Bing is Google. And all the Googlers made fun of that. So I would have never thought that I would ever work for a company like Microsoft. It was not the cool company. And here we are cool Bay Area people who would work for that company. But what Satya did was truly amazing. He changed the perception and the brand of Microsoft like anything, starting with cloud. Cloud was so huge for Microsoft, actually started making money for Microsoft. And then what we did with AI, now that is world changing. We were somewhere far behind in terms of tech, in terms of coolness, in terms of innovation. And with AI is what we call as we made the elephant dance. Why we say that is because when Microsoft announced its collaboration with OpenAI and ChatGPT, if you have heard the keynote of Sundar from Google after that, it was like AI, 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 as if he woke up after a sleep or something, and it was all about AI that he was talking. Every 2 minutes he would say AI. And here is Google, which is a leader in search, in AI, in MML, in everything, and Sundar was just taken aback. So I was okay, now we are making the elephant dance, and now it's truly Microsoft's era. So I feel very proud to be part of this company at this era where we are in this AI momentum, and what we are building is for the future. We are creating a new future, and I absolutely feel proud to be part of that. It's a good time to join Microsoft. Not selling the company in any way, but just saying.
I think it's a very exciting time in general to be in the industry. So thank you for sharing that. One thing that we've heard a little bit about from several of our speakers is being adaptable and changing, evolving in order to be able to keep up with the industry and the opportunities. Fauna, how important is adaptability in your career? And how do you approach reinventing yourself to keep up?
It is very important, and I think Elaine may have touched upon a few things here. So, the pace at which the industry is moving is so fast, right? So, you've got to move with that pace. You've got to have that mindset of change and adapting it. You have got to embrace change and not resist it. So, that adaptability is very, very important, because back in, when I started, I did not know what a smartphone was. Now it's like we are light years ahead of that, right? And you are all going into the future that is going to be even more fast-paced. And so you would have to be flexible with how you think. You have to be very quick thinkers. Your critical thinking will need to be extremely sharp. And you will be moving at a pace that for, what may seem fast now is only going to get faster. So it is very, very, very important. Please, I would encourage you to embrace that. Back when I thought I was embracing change and opportunity at Arm, even as I look back to 8 years prior to that, I go like, wow, I've really gone really fast and very far. And guess what? I haven't burnt out yet. And no goals are burning out, because there's another part that you need to manage.
Great, thank you. Pooja, you've talked a lot about your career trajectory, and you started off in a very technical role. Now you're in finance. Can you share how you made this transition from technical to the business side? And how does your technical background help you when you're collaborating with technical teams?
Thanks, Deb. So it started slow, and we've talked about change and adaptability quite a bit already today. And change is scary. You're not sure if you're going to like your new job, if you're going to be good at it. So it's definitely intimidating. And earlier it was like small changes. I moved from one role to another that maybe 50% or more of what I was already doing, I would be able to use in my new role. So there was some comfort in that. But fairly early in my career, I had an opportunity for a job rotation. And that was the pivotal moment, I think. And a lot of the companies today offer those kinds of opportunities. I think if you want to kind of, even coming out of, you apply for college, you're like undecided major. And that's okay. There is so much to learn, right? When you pick a company, you don't have to be, fixated on this is going to be my role and that's what I'm going to do all my life. You can, even within a given company, as you've seen from my example, you can go into many different directions. And one of the ways to really kind of test the waters, I would say, is these job rotation opportunities. And so I took on a 6-month job rotation in a role that I used to be a customer of. I didn't know how to do that job. But there was this comfort on if I bomb this thing and crash and burn, in 6 months, I still have my old job to go back to. And so I stepped into this role. I was managing a team, and I didn't know how to do their job. And so it was like I was very nervous on how am I going to manage these people, but I couldn't do their job. So I'm going to assess, are they doing a good job or not? Are they going to respect me? Are they going to listen to me? And pretty soon it was kind of clear I didn't need to know how to do their job. And it really helped me grow as a manager in that experience, because now I had to trust. I had to trust that the team knew what they were doing. And I had to delegate, and I had to rely on them to do what they knew how to do. And I brought in an aspect as an outsider, let's say, and as a customer of that group that they didn't have. I was able to tell them what is the internal customer looking for, how should they be kind of changing what service they are providing, how they are providing it to make themselves more valuable and integrated as part of that team. So then they valued my perspective. So I learned that when you are new at something, you might be nervous, but you have certain kind of skills because you are new that you can question the status quo and look at things differently. And so that was kind of a pivotal moment because I became comfortable in stepping into things that I didn't know a whole lot about and kind of learning. I rely on my experience and what I've learned so far, but I'll be able to pick up new things. And from there, I think I kind of took on more and more different roles as opportunity presented itself, and kind of kept on, and I've gone back and forth on very technical or less technical, like right now. And in a company, in the semiconductor industry, the company itself is very technical. So even if you're not in a technical role, kind of having that background, being able to speak the language, and even like kind of letting your cross-functional team know that you've been in their shoes at some point and can understand some of their constraints and what their goals or agendas are, gets you a long way in like driving consensus and getting everybody to work together. So I think kind of having that background, but being able to dabble and think of things from different perspectives really does help.
Yeah, one thing that I have noted in my career is that oftentimes when you work for a bigger company, it is sometimes easier to make transitions between one role and another without feeling like you have to know everything about the new role. So I think you've really taken advantage of what ARM has to offer for you. That's great. Now, some of us make very conscious decisions when it comes to our career journey, but there are times when unexpected opportunities arise, and we have to make a decision as to whether or not we're going to embrace that opportunity and maybe make a career change. Amrita, is there a time that this has happened to you? And what advice would you give to students who may feel hesitant about exploring an unfamiliar path?
Yeah, I mean, you plan something, but life has different plans for you. So it's same as in your life, as in your career, as in your professional journey. I have an undergrad in computer science and engineering from India, and I came to US to do my master's like any self-respecting Indian would do. You only have to be an engineer or a doctor, and that you have to know computer science, and that's the era I come from. But after coming over here and, in my first semester, I was a computer science major, but coding really never gave me that happiness. I did it because I have to do it and I have to get a job. I never enjoyed that. So I started talking around, and I was very privileged that the universities over here, they did offer a program where you can switch majors. And I wanted to apply to business school. Everybody said, don't do that, including my parents. And again, it's the time, Elaine, that you were talking about, like, 2000, early 2000s, market was going down, and folks told me that if you have a technical degree, at least you will have a job. With an MBA, you won't even get a job. Why would anybody hire you? You have no work experience. I came from India directly after my undergrad. English is not my first language. I don't speak that well. What will you do? You will have to go back home. So everybody really advised me against that don't switch majors, just keep on doing your computer science and get a job. That should be your first priority. And to me, it was like, if I get a job, will I be happy with that job? Will I really like it? And I wanted to take that chance. Elaine, your mom's note resonated so much with me that, it takes so much courage, and any change requires courage. So do you want to do that? And then Steve Jobs' quote also, like when you were presenting, it was like, man, these are all the things I've gone through in my life, that all the change needs courage. And at the end of the day, you have to go with your own gut, your own karma, whatever works for you. And I said, yeah, I'll make a change against all odds. I applied for business school, I got admission, and I ended up with getting one of the most high-paid jobs on the campus without any work experience. So that was a decision I took, and I was very young at that time, without any support from family, friends. Nobody was like supporting. I was going to do a disaster to my career, going back to India and get married. I mean, that's what everybody thought for me. But that's a decision I took for myself, and I made a career out of it. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make a change. If your gut says, and if your true calling is on something, you feel it's right, go ahead and do it. There'll be multiple opportunities. It's your decision. Of course, there are people who will advise you, they will give feedback, but at the end of the day, if you feel what's right for you, you do it because it will work for you. You got to believe in it. So, yeah.
I think it's really challenging at that age to make a decision that goes against the advice of so many people. So I think that was a very courageous move for you.
Now I can say because it paid off. I would have been married in India with doing nothing. But yeah, it's a risk we take, yeah.
Yep, certainly paid off for you. That's great. These days, we see a lot of changes in the global economics and trade policies, and they do have an impact on the semiconductor industry. Well, I'd like to understand how you see these changes and what strategies can businesses adopt to navigate the changes effectively. Fauna, do you want to start with your thoughts?
Yeah. So there definitely is an impact, right? When you think about it, there is an impact, natural disasters, global policy, global policies, and the relationship, global relationships. All of these definitely impact the supply chains, right, that we in the semiconductor industry are very dependent on. And it also does not help that we have one of our major, manufacturers, right, who are on an island, very close to a country that they do not necessarily, that at any point in time could pose a challenge. So that is a definite impact. I think everyone has realized that. You may have heard of the CHIPS Act, right? So we are trying to diversification here, make sure that we mitigate that risk. But even as companies, we feel that we need to get better at forecasting, right? Looking ahead, so that we cannot stress the supply chain as such, and it's very difficult in such a fast-paced, evolving industry to be able to do something like that. But I feel that companies are making intentional efforts to get better at that.
But Fauna, forecasting is always wrong. I do forecasting.
I have capacity planning beside me.
I do forecasting. It's always wrong.
That's why we do it every quarter, right?
The idea is like how less wrong you are. That's all I have to be, how less wrong. But it'll always be wrong. So
I
try to make it less.
Is there anything you want to add, Pooja?
Yeah, I think, to add some other challenges, right? So Micron is an IDM, integrated design and manufacturing company. So we have our own fabs all over the world and assembly houses. So it feels even more of a kind of a global company and an industry when you have manufacturing to worry about. So supply chain issues that we mentioned, definitely the dynamics politically affect a lot of things like tariffs. What can you buy from certain countries? How much it's going to cost you versus your competitor? And cost is a very kind of sensitive metric in the memory industry. So a few cents make a big difference. And then are you going to be able to sell to all your customers? So a lot of times you really have to have kind of backup plans in your strategy on should something happen, how are we going to quickly pivot? And so a lot of time is spent by the company in figuring out those plans and activating them should the need arise. And as we have seen over the last several years, either due to political issues or things like the COVID pandemic, these plans had to be activated really quickly. I mean, we have design teams in US and our manufacturing is in Taiwan and assemblies in China and customers are all over the world, right? So really a lot of things have to go right for the original plans to work out. The companies have to think about diversity of suppliers, doing the most critical things in-house so they have more control over it, having strategic reserves. And then something that a lot of us are having to spend a lot of investment in is the government affairs teams. A lot of the companies, CHIPS Act was mentioned, right? Working with the governments all over the world to help them understand why certain policies are really crucial, and helping them design those programs so that the companies can be successful. So I think those are a lot of things that companies are having to think about today because of how globally connected everything is.
Yeah, adaptability again becomes important.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Amrita, for someone starting a non-technical career in semiconductors, is there any advice you can offer on career progression and how these individuals can make an impact?
Yeah, and again, I'm non-technical. I'm not a silicon or a semiconductor person, but I have made my career out of it. So I can speak on that behalf is, at the end of the day, in a company, in a business, it's all about profitability and it's all about money making. You have to be profitable for the business. With whatever great tech you have, if it's not going to scale up and if we are not going to make money, it's not going to move forward. So being a non-tech person in a technical company, you need to bring that diverse opinion, because to form a great team, you need to have multiple people with multiple opinion and feedback, and that diversity needs to be there. If just engineers are making the decisions, sometimes they become so obsessed with precision, because that's what engineers are. They're very binary. It's right or wrong for them. But the business decisions are not as binary. There's a lot of assumptions, a lot of gray areas. So if you're a non-tech person, just ask simple questions. What you're building, is it faster? Is it cheaper? And is it better performance? Those are three things that I need to ask to my engineer. And then only the business proposal is going to move forward. You don't need to go into a lot of technical details. You don't need to understand what nanometer it is or what kind of code is written behind it. I just need to do, is it faster? Is it cheaper? Is it more efficient? That's it. And will I be able to make money out of it or not? And all the business decisions are made around these three basic questions. So if you're a non-tech person, that's totally fine. Ask basic questions, provide a diverse opinion, and get a seat at the table. At the end of the day, as I said, it's all about making the money. It's all about making the business profitable. So learn the language, what the language is, and what the technical jargons are being used, but keep the principles very basic. And it's okay to ask basic questions. It's always okay to ask basic questions, because trust me, a lot of people have it in their head, but they'll not ask it. Just ask it.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Absolutely.
And of course, on the flip side, I think it's important for the technical people in the industry to recognize the value that other roles bring to the company and to the team.
I was watching a movie while I was coming. It's called Men in Boat. I don't know if you have seen that or not. So it's about some students from Washington University, how they ended up winning gold medal at Olympics 1936. And one dialogue in that movie was, there are a group of 8 rowers. These rowers, they go in a crew and they row. So somebody asked that, how was it like working in the team of 8? And he said, it never felt like it was working in a team of 8 because we were always one. So to win a gold in Olympic, you have to be one. To be number one in any company, in any industry or any company, you have to work as a team with everything around you, all the diverse perspective that I spoke about. But at the end of the day, we are all focused towards one, and it has to be one team. So you need everybody to row the boat together to get that Olympics gold medal.
What a great analogy. Thank you. All right, Pooja, question for you. What have been the biggest challenges and rewards of working in a global environment, which I think all of us end up doing nowadays? How can a student prepare to succeed when they're working with diverse international teams?
Great question. And I think even if we are not working with a global team, we still end up working with a very diverse team. So useful anytime. And I think definitely first understand that diversity comes in many different ways. There's only so much that you can actually see. There is a lot of diversity that you don't see. And so don't make assumptions about that you know something about somebody. I think somebody that I was talking to not that long ago, right, said, drew a big circle and said, that's somebody's life, and this is how much you know about it. So don't make any assumptions. Value diversity, I mean, talked about, you have to be one team and you need kind of differing opinions to make a solid product or whatever outcome you're working on, whether it's a school project team or a team at work, right? If you work with people that think just like you, are just like you are missing out on so many different points of view and making a robust, competitive product. And so embrace diversity and embrace dissenting voices. you don't want people saying what you want to hear or what you are already thinking. You want people to offer an alternative point of view, even if that may be an opposing point of view, because you could have blind spots. So if you listen actively to solve problems that these dissenting voices are bringing up, you will probably avoid failure for whatever project it is down the road. You can plan for contingency on, okay, should that happen, what is it that we are going to do? And I think if you're fortunate enough to work with a globally diverse team or across time zones, I think Ellen had an amazing story of she came back a changed person from her visit to China. And I've experienced that so many times. I'm kind of lucky to be in a company that has presence in like 18 countries now is the count, and got to visit a lot of these places and at least work with them or Zoom, and just approach things with an open mind. Be humble, try to learn from their culture, and there is so much to learn from everybody. And I would say in terms of some of the practical tips, right, if you are having to, when you join the workforce and you have to work across time zones, be respectful, be equitable. Don't always have crappy night calls saved for the folks in other time zone. If you're dealing with teams that there's English is not their primary language, make an effort to learn some few basic phrases in their language. I think goes a long way at kind of breaking that ice and them seeing that you're making an effort. If you get an opportunity to visit or even like live in that place with that team for some amount of time, grab it if your life at that stage allows you to do. There is just so much that you can gain from being immersed in that culture. And then don't assume, right, that everybody is working for a US-based company, for example, that like English is going to be the way of working. Adopt tips like sending out presentations ahead of time, sending out some write-up on what you are meeting to discuss, action items afterwards, so it's very clear on, hey, we talked about this, you are going to do this by that time, etc. And then understand kind of how work is done in different cultures. A lot of times elsewhere it could be hierarchical. You have to work with somebody's management team, get consensus, then you can come to a meeting and actually get alignment on doing things. So understand some of these nuances. They'll help you make progress a lot faster than learning the hard way that things are done differently in different cultures. But I think the reward out of it is you'll just grow personally and professionally a lot working in these environments. And then you become a lot more marketable to other companies having these experiences and working with global teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that my experience working with global teams has really been educational for me and has really opened up my perspective on how best to interact with different people. You certainly learn that people have different communication styles, and you have to be respectful enough to pull people into the conversation if they're not engaged, and not speak over them.
Yeah. I mean, the cultural nuances are so interesting. So in one of my jobs, I used to do pricing, and our customers used to be companies like Lenovo and Sony. So Lenovo is a Chinese customer. I go and I want to sell my SSD. I say $100. They will come back. They will say $60. We go back and forth. We negotiate, and we end up at, say, $75. Sold. Very happy. I go to Sony. I say $100. The guy looks at me. No response. Nothing. And 2 days later, they just come back and say, no sale. So, okay, give me a counter proposal. No sale. So that's the cultural difference, right? So when you're working with a Japanese company, you go with one number, and then they shut off after that. If it's going to work for them, they'll take it. They are not in the process of bargaining. In the Chinese company, if you go with 75 number, they'll bring you down to like 40, and then you start there. So those little bit of cultural nuances working with each country is also very interesting. And again, you gain all that with experience. So going back to Pooja's point, whenever you have that opportunity, grab the opportunity to work with multicultural teams, companies, and get that added on to your resume.
All right, we're going to go from cross-cultural collaboration to cross-discipline collaboration. Fauna, how important do you think cross-discipline collaboration is in the semiconductor industry, and how have you personally facilitated such collaboration in your role?
So my role, it is pivotal in my role because as heading the programs at ARM, I have to do that. Now, is it important? It's very crucial, right, to have that discipline because it's multiple teams coming together. I'll use your analogy, all in that boat together. You've all got to reach the timeline, and none of you can slow one another down. You have to all understand the importance of your work, be able to communicate that work, communicate, the blockers that or the issues you might be facing. Each of you needs to understand the importance of what you're doing. The various, you're all building various components, basically. Sometimes there are teams who are doing multiple things at the same time as well. So you have to be very aware of these various things. So it is extremely critical in this industry to make sure that the multidisciplinary teams, they function successfully. And in my role, right, I play a very important part in understanding, because sometimes each one is buried into their part of what they are doing, right? So they're unable to possibly see what is ahead. And that is where in my role, I'm able to gauge, I know when someone is struggling, even when they do not necessarily say the word, because it goes to understanding and having those soft skills that are extremely important, where you're able to assess, you're able to read, because not everyone communicates verbally. People communicate through body language. In some of my teams, through their eyes. You're supposed to read and understand because they're talking to you with their eyes, right? And it's so important. And all of these parts, they all form this team that takes us over the finish line. So extremely important. And when you're in a role where you are responsible for the successful delivery that they are making, it is even more important for you to be extremely aware of all of that and each one's contributions, making sure that everyone is a valued member, right? You cannot dismiss one over the other as being more important. Everyone plays an extremely important part, their agility, their flexibility, their ability to pivot, right? Because sometimes I might need to shift course, and along with me, all the others need to shift very quickly. So, and that is something that in this industry I've noticed, and in my role, I've noticed it's very important. And it's amazing how when you are a team and you work as a team, you successfully navigate all of these pivots and you get to that finish line together.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to break now and open up the questions to the audience. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask? Any specific panelists or the whole panel in general? We're getting the microphone back to people.
Thank you. This question is to Ms. Sinha. So in your capacity planning position, I know that I've heard, maybe a little naive of me, but there's kind of 3 different ways to plan. It's that you can do high cost and high innovation. You could do low cost and you can just streamline, so like basic products. But then I've heard that the worst way to go about it is you want to minimize costs, but you also want to do a lot of innovation. When it comes to your team in cloud capacity and planning, how do you kind of take those ideas and look towards your future states?
So as I said, I have to plan capacity very optimally. That is the main function, because to the world, cloud is limitless. That's how we are marketing cloud as a product. That anybody at whatever time, wherever in whatever part of the world, if they want to run a cloud virtual machine, they should be able to do it. But the capacity in real sense is not limitless. The data center size is limited, we have power that's limited, and the number of servers that will go in the data center is also limited. So when I plan capacity, of course, I have to make sure that each and every server that I have in the data center is utilized at a very optimal level. How do I do that? Is it based on, to your point, is it based on cost? Yes, cost is the main factor. It is the main factor. But cost always doesn't mean you have to compromise for quality. Cost will also come from the tech that we are coming up with. Newer tech at lower cost is what we always want to push forward. For example, all of cloud, when all the cloud providers they started going with Intel as the main CPU. Intel was the #1 company out there for their Intel CPU. But then here comes Lisa Su with her AMD chip, beating the crap out of everybody and giving Intel a run for their money. She made the exact same chip, much cheaper, using less power, and guess what? CPU, we've talked about diversification. Awesome idea. I have my CPU, supplier diversification, I have a cheaper product, it is going to use less power, voila, we want to do it. So you don't have to compromise. Yes, cost has to be there, but the compromise will come from technology that's going to offset. So planning at the most optimal level from a cost and from a power standpoint of view is what I need to do as a shareholder of the company, because we need to make our margin targets, but we also have an SLA to our customer that we want to maintain. We want to maintain our brand. We want to maintain the quality of Microsoft product and services that we provided. Yeah, easy, right, to do all of this? But it's definitely fun. It's definitely fun on how you balance between all these different facets of planning in this cloud world. So it's very interesting, actually. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, we have a couple.
I wanted to ask this question for anyone, because it seems like many of the people here came by a wide variety of routes to the field of semiconductors. I think the field is very uniquely positioned, or at least very interestingly positioned, because many areas contribute to it, but it also contributes to many areas. And what I wanted to ask is, how would you recommend someone who is working in semiconductors, but maybe it's not the foundation of their professional experience or career, kind of adapt?
Anyone want to take it?
I can take it. So in terms of kind of deciding what aspect of the semiconductor end-to-end you want to focus on, right? I think in terms of like picking a company or a specialization within that, I think look at what interests you, right? And I think to learn about what that might be, because as a student you maybe don't get exposure to what the different roles can be. I would say talk to people who are in those jobs, right? Try and understand what does your typical week look like? You know, what's most exciting? What do you find kind of tedious to do? And kind of gain a little bit of understanding about what the different roles offer, so that you can understand whether that's something you would enjoy or not. And then, like I have done, right, also keep in mind on what, for a given company, what are the different types of roles that may be possible. So if you like the company, but you don't like the role you end up picking, you want to have that flexibility to move around.
Yeah, I'll just add a few more things out there. So you possibly, right, I know ARM does this. We have panel discussions where we advertise this for any student out there, anyone who might have an inkling of what it is about. And we invite a lot of our leaders within our company who sit on that panel and take your questions, because it's an introduction to what is this about? Will it fit me, right? Am I passionate, enough to go after something like this? And that is one route. The other route is internships, right? And you have a rotation. We have graduate programs where if you're not too keen on hardware, do I want software? Do I want design? and you will potentially find something in there. So there's various things, various routes you can take. Sometimes when I look back at where I started, I go like, down, I never had all these type of opportunities when I was back in India. But you're also fortunate where you can actually get an introduction even before making a full career out of it. And I would encourage you to, to absolutely seize those opportunities.
Another question.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, good evening, I think by now. So yeah, I mainly wanted to ask, like, I'm a first-year PhD student here. So a lot of us are either taking the master's course or the PhD course, but our end goal, let's say, is the industry. So how should we pave our path for this graduate degree so that we might end up in the most suitable career, let's say in the semiconductor industry, because that's the most booming right now for, let's say, electrical engineering graduates and all, right? So how should we take our courses, or what should we focus on in this time being so that we are prepared by the end of our degree or within the course of the degree so that we might find that platform?
I'm sure all the companies have great internship program. I know Microsoft, particularly our team, the hardware infrastructure organization, we have internship, and just this summer, a lot of PhD students came and interned with us. I would really recommend, especially for PhD students, to work with your professors to see what kind of industry partnerships they have. Try to see small projects that these companies are running and get yourself associated with that. I'm from a very non-technical background myself, but when I was doing my MBA, the reason I got a job was because my professor was working with some company and he was doing some research for them, and I got tagged in as an RA with the professor, and I got a job at the same company. So for me, that path worked, and I think that's still one of the best ways to get a foothold in the company, because getting a job is a lot through networking. You need to know the right people at the right time. There are multiple opportunities and there are multiple people applying for that. But that networking really helps. So, and being a PhD student, you will have access to that as you do internships through your professors or through university programs with these companies, make connections with the people over there. So when you're working, of course, you have to work on the work that you have to deliver, but spend a lot of time talking to people around you. What are the projects others are working? And I know people in companies are very busy, but they do give time to students. Everybody pays back, right? Or pays forward. I don't know what is the right term. I always get confused, but they do spend time and talk to them to understand what are the projects they're working on, and have that relationship and have that network established so that by the time you graduate, you can just ping the person and it's easy for you to get into the role at that time. So.
Yeah, that's great advice. I agree with that. Another question?
Yeah, I have two, and they deal with money. So some of you switched companies, and one person just stayed with one company. It seems, at least evidence, that you get pay raises, significant pay raises, when you change companies, versus inside a company that may be harder. Maybe you can comment on that. And number two, there's still evidence that women are paid at 80% than men. Do you see that in your industry, or are you not aware of it, or how would you know that that is not true?
Wow, you're asking questions that's so passion for me, and the women pay parity. Oh my God, we can have a session on that. And we are all women sitting over here, so we'll have a lot to say about it. So the first part of your question was, do changing jobs really get you a pay raise? In the initial part of your career, yes, that's a true statement, at least when I was doing it. So I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody else. I'm just talking about my own experience. People might have different experiences, but I think it did help me grow faster, both from a career standpoint of view and from a monetary standpoint of view. And the way I did was, I did a kind of flip-flop: big company, mid-sized company, big company, mid-sized company. So the way I was doing is, I started with big companies like Apple and all, got my name associated with it, got my name associated with some great products that Apple was launching, iPhone back then. And then I became a hot property in the market because everybody was trying to do Apple kind of products. Again, I'm going to date myself, but there was a company called Palm. Does anybody know what Palm did? Palm Trios, there's handheld devices. So Palm was the company that actually was the first one to make a handheld device. It was called Palm because it was size of your palm. But there comes Apple and then makes this cool, sleek device. So Palm was still struggling, small company, and HP acquired Palm because they wanted to compete with Apple, and they wanted people with a similar skill set. And I was pretty early on in my career. I was just a planner over there, and HP Palm hired me as a senior manager. I got a huge jump from salary point of view, as well as, I jumped 2 steps ahead of my career. So yes, those initial phases, it does help getting the right job, associating. And then, when you're in a mid-sized company, from there, you get like a title bump, a salary bump, and then you start, if you're getting stagnated, then go to a bigger company again and advance your skill set, and then come back to mid-size. So it does help, but it only helps in the initial few years of your career. Because your career is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And at the end of the day, everything is level set for everybody. Again, my experience, it did give me a lot of perspective, working at different companies, understanding different culture. Each company has their own culture. Bringing value to my team from what I learned from the prior company. And the perk was getting more salary and a better title. Yes, it did help. Anybody wants to compare?
Yeah, since I'm the other extreme, I'll take it. And I think definitely salary, title, all that matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. And so you want to be paid fairly, equitably, and you want to be satisfied with that side of the equation. But what is the work that you're doing is also very important. I mean, we talked about change a lot, and there is always uncertainty with that. You are perfectly happy at a certain company, but you think, I want that bump and I'm going to change. What if it's not the right fit? Absolutely. Right? So it doesn't always work upwards and onwards every single time. So that's a factor to consider. But I think at a certain point, and this I've observed it to be true, I joined Micron as engineer 1, right? Like the very first level that you can go, and I've obviously gotten plenty of promotions on the way. That high from a pay raise or a promotion doesn't last that long. It's the relationships and the work and the trust and your credibility and reputation is what keeps you motivated, or at least true for me, and the challenges that you get along the way. And so I think when you are at a certain company, a lot of times it's kind of easier to get those big projects and rely on the foundation that you have laid at that company to keep kind of doing more and more impactful work. And so that's kind of why I've been at the same company. And I think a lot of the companies now do pretty openly talk about pay equity. They have committees focused on that. Reviews happen to make sure that all that is equitable. I know Micron publishes a DEI report every year, and pay equity is a part of that. So I feel pretty kind of comfortable that companies are taking a look at this, not to say it doesn't happen. And there are a lot of other aspects that affect women, having kids and having those career breaks that often come with that. So it's true, but companies are also looking very closely at that metric and kind of doing what they can to correct it.
I just want to add, so they're on 2 different parts of it, but I've been with ARM like 8 years now, and to what Pooja said, companies are taking that DEI, making, it's a big thing. I'm also part of the DEI, and I lead the women at ARM in North America. So it is important. They are trying to bridge the parity and the gap. However, it goes back to, yes, you will get a change in the remuneration when you move. However, there is a point at which you can't get it further, and at that point in your career, you get it in other ways. You get it through job satisfaction. What you're doing, do you love what you do, right? And sometimes there are other within your company, there are other, you get bonuses. It's based on, again, the impact you make to whatever it is you're part of. And those things value, they kind of pan out pretty well, even though you're in a company for X number of years and you haven't swapped or changed over?
Yeah, definitely that's very important because, again, you can do the job switching early on, as I said. Don't do it always because at one point you will have to build your credibility that this person is going to stay with us long enough to be able to have value and impact. And as you become senior, creating an impact is not easy because as you're senior, your scope becomes way bigger. So creating impact becomes tough. You have to be there long enough. You have to build your sweat equity and your credibility. Otherwise, people will think that, oh, she'll just come for 2 years and leave, and then people will stop hiring you. So again, I would say early on it works, but at the end of the day, it's a marathon. So you have to stabilize at a certain point of time and at least spend 3-4 years to build that brand that, no, you're not just a quitter and every 2 years you will change. So it's a fine balance that you do. And the pay parity and the pay equity question that you're asking about, to me, it's always, I personally have never felt that bias. I have never ever felt discriminated against being a woman, I got paid less, or being a woman in the room, nobody heard my voice. I have never felt that myself. Maybe it was happening and I was naive enough not to even process it, but I did not feel that myself because I always know what my value is and what my worth is, and I'll make sure I'll get paid to what value my worth is. I'm not going to compare my salary to what my male counterparts is getting. It's about me, it's not about anybody else. So that's how I feel. Having said that, there are a lot of women probably who have still not got through that whole bump of, yes, it's my value, and that's where women leaders should come and make sure that the pay parity thing is taken care of. For the people who are not thinking about themselves, you help them think about it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, great discussion, great questions. Thank you so much. So we're just about out of time, but I'm just going to wrap it up with one final quick lightning round question. And this question is for each of our panelists. Could you offer a single word or phrase as a piece of advice for young people who will be starting their careers? Amrita.
I have always followed my own passion and things that have made me happy. So my career advice to anybody would be that be happy in what you are doing. You will be spending a lot of time with your peers, with your colleagues. You have to enjoy what you're doing. Because the amount of time you'll spend with these people is insane. You will see them more than you'll see your own family. So you have to have fun while you're doing work. If it's not fun, if you're not enjoying, it's not the place for you. Change would be my advice. Don't stick around too long that you end up being jaded. And again, I'm going back to that whole theory of changing and switching jobs. But if you're not happy, it's not about changing companies, change groups, whatever. You need to be surrounded with people that gives you positivity. You're going to spend a lot of time with them. And if things are not working out, don't wait it out too long. Make a move, change. There's always something better out there for you.
Okay, great.
Networking. One word, but such a huge impact it will have to your lives, to your careers, to your journey in your career. So I would say make sure that every opportunity of networking you get, you seize it. You expand your network, you will learn through your network, you will identify opportunities through your network, you will find and be able to promote your brand and your personal brands through your network. So networking.
Excellent. Pooja, what is your thought?
Student, always. You're not done once you leave here. So be curious and embrace lifelong learning. You'll be ready for whatever comes your way.
All right, great. And with those 3 pieces of advice, we're going to wrap up this panel. Thank you, everybody. You've been a great audience. We really appreciate your thoughtful questions. And thank you to our panelists for sharing your thoughts and your time.
A pleasure.
Thank you for having us.